Mag je ook? Oké.
Het zal toch niet heel toeval wezen.
Hè?
Hier wat water?
Ja, het is ook niet helemaal over de lijn van de politiek. Van links naar rechts.
We've been mainly discussing problems related to unemployment, poverty, disadvantaged groups from an international perspective, European perspective, American perspective. But of course, since we're in the Netherlands, we should also focus on the relevance of all those contributions to the debate for the Dutch situation. And I think, especially at this time, when we just had our general elections and our waiting whether there will be a new cabinet and what measures that cabinet will take, it's a good opportunity to hear a little bit about the views of, well, let's say representatives from various political parties about what they think should happen now in this time of crisis, and whether this crisis is indeed a good opportunity to change some things fundamentally in order to, well, what I said in the beginning, both strengthen the sustainability of public finance and on the other hand help vulnerable groups on the labour market. Because now the formation of the new cabinet is going on, we thought if we ask members of parliament to come here and discuss these matters, probably especially from the two parties who are now involved in the formation process, they won't be able to say anything because their lips are sealed as long as the formation goes on. Therefore we decided to invite people who are related to the think tanks of the various four political parties, because those think tanks often are quite well known, famous for the fact that they often see developments going on, changes perhaps going on before the party representatives are willing or able to tell us about. So perhaps they will be able to tell us something about what we can expect in the near future. I'll introduce the four members of the political forum to you. Well, let's take the order which is on the slides. Arjan Vliegenthart is sitting there. He's director of the scientific bureau of the Dutch Socialist Party, the SP, and also senator. Left of him is Frans Becker, deputy director of the Wiardi Beckman Foundation, the think tank of the Dutch Labour Party, the PvdA. Then we have to the most right position Raymond, director of the Scientific Insitute of the Christian Democratic Party, CDA. And then we asked, of course, if someone of the Telders Foundation, the think tank of the liberal VVD, would be able to be here present. Unfortunately, they were not able to be here today, but fortunately, they suggested that we could ask someone who is not really a representative of the VVD or the Telders Stichting, but who's active in a working group, I think, of the Telders Stichting, and is at least supporting, I think, liberal politics. That is Raymond, director of Mercer, Marsh Benefits Benelux, and therefore also more or less a representative of the VVD in this forum. Okay, because we do not have very much time to discuss all the issues which have been addressed today, I'll just ask some members of the forum here to comment on some issues, and perhaps if Giuliano or Peter would like to interfere, then of course you're free to give your comments to or ask questions. And also, of course, you in the room, if you would like to ask any question, please mention it to me, then I'll try to give you the word. But first, well, let me start with the two parties which are now most involved in the formation of a new cabinet. So Frans Becker from the Wiardi Beckman Foundation and Raymond Rood, let me say, from Telders Foundation. What do you think at this moment is the primary problem, the main problem that we are facing with respect to social policies and the labour market? So what is the main thing that we should address our attention to if we want to tackle the problems in this time of economic crisis? Perhaps first, Frans Becker.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Never Waste a Good Crisis is the title. It's a nasty crisis. It's not a good crisis. And it's not helping us very much to solve any problems that we are facing in the labor market and the economy, I think. I think basically is which perspective you choose in order to look at the problems of the labor market. What I learned today again, and it confirmed the views that we have at my foundation, is that the role of labor market policies is limited. There are structural problems in the economy, there are macroeconomic problems, there's a very heavy deflationary pressure, specifically in Spain, Italy, Greece, etc. And there are very specific pockets of problems in the labor market. You mentioned the polarization in the metropolitan areas. That's one. There's also the north-south divide in practically every European country. Only in Germany it's the other way around. Bavaria is doing very well, but in Great Britain, for example, there's a huge difference between the north and the south. The question is, can you solve those problems with a general labor market policy? That's one perspective that you should choose.
We're going to discuss, of course, the policies also. But first I would like to know, if you would have to select one particular problem which you say, at this moment, this is the most urgent, for which we should try to do something.
Well, I think that the basic problem that I would address is good work and what we call in our tradition bestaanszekerheid, which is the Dutch word for maybe freedom from want. That is basic, I think, because both of them are threatened by a number of longer-term trends, not only the crisis trends, but longer-term trends, and I think we have to make sure that these values are maintained.
Okay, thank you. Raymond Brood, what, in your opinion, is the main problem that we're now facing that we should tackle?
Well, of course, you have two perspectives, the long one and the short one. If you look at the long one, we still expect that, or we know there is a demographic effect on the labor force. And we know there will be a shortage either on particular type of jobs or type of professions, or in the broader sense as such. And to overcome that, you also have to look at the short term. And in the short term, it's very, very necessary to let nobody fall out the boat, to say it that way. So participation is the most important thing. How do you get people in the workforce again? Although I know it is a crisis at this moment and unemployment is rising, that is still the issue we have to address, and we have to address it from as well as the employer as the employee. Both are in the driving seat. But okay. I would say, and it's also a remark to your speech, that the emancipation of the employee, there's still a lot to do. At a certain time they think it's just coming and they are not in control anymore. And they should be more in control themselves.
But if you point to participation on the labour market, then for which groups you think at this moment this is the biggest problem? The elderly or the young people? Or
well, the elderly have the problem of falling out. But that has also to do with how we have treated them. As you are probably very familiar in your institute, I'm coming with I have a lot of clients in businesses, and after 35, 40 years, there is no investment in people in training anymore. So is it strange to say that when they are 67, there is a little bit difficulty with their productivity? No, it's not. So there has to be a change on that side, but also on the employee side, to be more in charge of that.
Okay. I would like to ask the other two if there is any very important problem which they haven't mentioned yet.
Well, lastly, subscribe to my...
Arjan, Vliegenthart?
No, it's lastly subscribe to my right-hand
okay.
labor. The main problem of current times is that we do not have enough work.
People who do not have work. Okay.
I agree with my neighbor. I believe that there will be...
And they need to negotiate,
No, but the availability of labor resources, that's the main problem. And immediately after this crisis, we will have that problem on the table. And even at this moment, you see the shortage of labor in several sectors, healthcare, but also some part of education. So I believe that's the main problem we should face.
Let's continue a little bit on this point, because these kind of problems, are they mainly the responsibility of the government to tackle them? So should the next government, irrespective of whether the CDA is taking part in it, focus on this problem, or is it mainly an issue which you could say this is the responsibility of social partners, of employers and trade unions or employees?
Well, we are not joining these negotiations, but nevertheless, I strongly believe that the government should face these kinds of problems.
Yes, and what's then the relationship between the government and the responsibility?
Well, of course, there should be some cooperation with the social partners, but nevertheless, I think it's crucial that the government will give his view on this issue and what will be the long-term perspectives of the labor market and how we will deal with this problem.
Okay, is this something which you all think, that the government is the first responsible actor now and that only perhaps later on
Well, I think
social partners will take over?
no, I don't think that's a wise direction to take. I think, well, basically what we witness is an enormous risk shift to the labor factor of labor in the last decades, and I think that the employers and employee organizations should work out a really large compromise with a large L and a large C, comparable to what we have seen after the Second World War in the end of the 40s, 50s, and what we have seen at the Accord of Wassenaar in the 80s. Because if we don't have such a large gesture to solve a number of problems together, we won't make it. And the government is absolutely not the only partner, I think, in the game. And I think the social partners, and I hope, my God, that the labor unions will reunite again and be a serious player, have to get around the table to formulate such a compromise together with the government. In the other two great compromises we have known after the war, it was the same. The government was present, but the social partners played a crucial role.
But the government should take the initiative to invite the social partners
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
They should direct let's say, it shouldn't be an unconditional open question. I mean, they have to direct the work of the partners.
But already a lot of work has been done. For example, the Becker committee some years ago with a participation of unions and also from employers association, they have already, well, let's say a framework. But of course, I agree with Frans Becker that it's good to have a kind of consultation. But nevertheless, we should act at this moment, in my view.
Are you Vliegenthart?
And I do agree, and I think everyone agrees here that in the end the success of any compromise is to a high extent determined by the fact whether employees and employers and their unions actually accept what is formulated and will live up to it. But I do think that the government has an important role to play as a solid and trustworthy partner. And one of the things that we have seen recently in the discussion with pension age, for instance, is that the government and politics in general hasn't been a very trustworthy partner. And I think that is a problem. That if the government sets out to facilitate such an arrangement, it also needs to live up with it eventually, and should not change rules every year or every shift in government. In that respect, I do think that one of the major contributions that the government needs to make is to facilitate and keep on facilitating and not changing the rules of the game as soon as the employers and employees have.
What do you exactly mean by not changing the rules of the game? Now a new government is starting, so they should leave everything as it is now?
No. I think that we're in a crisis, so in that extent, we could do different things, and there are problems that need answering. But what we have seen is that if once there was a solution, for instance, in regard to the pension age, and it was not my solution, but in the end, politics rapidly changed it only as soon as the ink was not dry yet. It wasn't put into practice before it was changed by another coalition. I think there we have a problem with the trustworthiness of any government within the coming years. And I think that if the solution is to be successful, the government has to be a reliable partner in that respect.
Okay. Now, Raymond,
I think the role of the government is still very limited in that it are the social partners, the employers and the employees who should take action because they can create the jobs. The government can't create anything. And when they did, those jobs were away before you know it. So what we have to do is to be far more facilitating the process as a government, but that facilitating is more in the legal structure than in taking the lead. I don't believe that the government should take the lead in this. It's far more, as Frans Becker was telling, like the Wassenaar Accord, go to that direction, because then you have all commitment of all the parties involved.
But we know that the Wassenaar Agreement was partly concluded because there was quite a lot of pressure from the government at that time that they would interfere in collective bargaining if they wouldn't close an agreement.
Yeah, but at this time, I mean, never waste a good crisis. The sense of urgency is very known to everybody. So you think, I mean, there is nobody who says, well, this can go on for a few years, it goes fine. Nobody, I don't think anyone around here would say that. So the sense of urgency makes it even more obvious that people will take their responsibility, as well as on the employers and the employee side. The only thing you have with the trade union at this moment is the problem of representation.
Okay, so actually you're saying the government should do for what it's responsible and the social partners should do what's their responsibility, but they shouldn't wait for each other.
No.
Yeah. Okay, perhaps now we should go more or less to the content of what policies should be started, implemented in the coming years. Frans Becker, you were much in favor of a new collective agreement or accord between social partners and the government. What should be the most important elements of such an agreement, such a social pact?
We have interviewed, I think, by now about 100 persons to find out about their anxieties and their dreams in life. And much of these interviews is about work, about the respect, about the possibilities, the pressure in their work, and the, let's say, the resignation many of these people feel in order to improve the situation. And they are really under pressure, and this is not only in private enterprises, this is in the public sector as well. Let's say that would be one interesting field to move on.
But can you be a little bit more concrete? Because what, at central level, the national level, what kind of agreement you can close?
This is a very complicated matter, because part of it is tied to the type of corporate governance we have, with a very strong shareholder value influence. Part of it has to do with public governance. Why do we organize the care the way we do? So this is a multi-leveled and multifaceted thing. This is one. The second one is, of course, employment. Third is social security. Fourth is flexibility.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt.
So it is a broad agenda. It is the same kind of broad agenda we had in the 90s.
Sorry, I really would like to ask you what exactly could be part of that agreement, because of course that we should do something with social security and something with labour market, I think everyone would agree. But the question is it possible to come to an agreement which really helps it a little bit further?
I hope. There's an economist in Holland who has written an excellent proposal for that. He is well known in these circles, and we published it a couple of months ago, which is about a minimum income, which is about enhanced participation by tax measures, which is about preventing the gap between insiders and outsiders, by introducing a gradual transition from flexible to protected work. There is I think, a very good agenda to work out there. Okay. And I think that a government could ask the social partners to work out this type of agenda.
Okay. Raymond Gradus, what's your opinion about what we hear these days, that the two potential coalition partners are going to strive for a big exchange, some big reforms in various fields?
Well, I agree with you that we should be a little bit more concrete. I'm interested in a view about, for example, during the campaign, there was a lot of discussion, should be a transfer period where in which employers paying employment benefits. I'm very interested will that be part of the new coalition agreement, and also, well, how you deal with the duration of unemployment benefits? So I think, well, this kind of elements should be in this agreement. And I'm a little bit, of course, I agree with Frans Becker. That's important that those elements. I don't know which famous Dutch economist you mentioned, but nevertheless,
he's leading this discussion.
Oh, he's leading this discussion. Okay, well, I already saw a famous journal, but nevertheless, I'm interested in these kind of measures and what will come out of the coalition agreement.
Okay.
We'll have to tap the negotiation rooms.
I can, although you're here now actually on behalf of the Telders Foundation, but nevertheless you're also a representative, I might say, perhaps of the employers or of business. That idea of letting the employers pay the first half year of the unemployment insurance benefit, do you think that's a good idea to stimulate employers to invest more in workers, to help them better to move to another job?
Well, I think you can make a comparison with the disability law when both parties have obligations to get people at work as soon as possible, either in their company, either in another company. And I think there must be, from both sides, there must be an interest to be as soon as possible, either in your own company or otherwise in another company, back to work. So if you look at unemployment or employment labor protection, that at this moment hinders a lot of companies and will hinder longer a lot of companies to take people on board. And the more people are expand or push that forward, the longer we are in the problems that we are right now.
So you plead, if I understand you correctly, for relaxation of employment protection, dismissal protection.
Yeah.
And in that case, would it also be acceptable that employers have to pay unemployment benefits?
I think if you link that, yes.
Okay, so this might be a kind of exchange between perhaps the Labour Party and the Liberal Party. Yeah, well, we'll see. Arjan Vliegenthart, the Socialist Party is often, well, perhaps you could say even attacked for the fact that they do not want to really change any things, that structural reforms are not on your agenda. Is that true, or are there also fundamental changes that you would like to?
Indeed, I think that there are fundamental changes, and one of the major questions that the welfare state has always been about is the question: how can we provide security to people and to citizens, to employees in an insecure world? I think that is the basic question that we have nowadays, which is on the table. And I'm happy to say that, for instance, even a couple of months ago, both my party and the Social Democrats launched an initiative to grant more rights to flex workers. So I do think that we need to change things, and I do think that we have seen the rise of people that work for themselves, not always because they want to, but most of the times because they do not want to, but they have been fired and have to find ways to make a living. But sometimes because they want to. That's a new group that needs to be addressed. And also there I think that the fundamental question of the welfare states applies. How to provide security in an insecure world without making people inactive or taking away the initiatives that everyone in society has. And in that respect I would look for the other direction that both my neighbors on the left-hand side, but that is not a surprise. I think that more security in the current system would actually help us to not only overcome the crisis, but also improve society. And I think that's what politics in the end is about. I do agree that we need to discuss about the labor market, but the labor market wasn't the problem and isn't the problem in this current crisis. So we should put the burden in that respect where it belongs. And there I would be very much in favor of, if we want to discuss the budget, put the costs where they fall and to those who have created them.
So it's time to move back to the other couch, because I got the impression that you do not fully agree with this point of view. First Raymond, because Raymond Gradus, I mean.
Yeah, it's difficult. Well, in a way, I agree with Arjan Vliegenthart that we should look at the rights of the flexible labor. But that's not the only element. If you, for example, look at the proposal by the Becker committee, they increase rights of the flexible labor skill, especially the rights to have employment and education, working education. But I believe that to have a deal with the labor market problem, also the other elements with my neighbor already put forward are very important. So in a way, I agree with him, but only for one small part.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think you can hardly say at this moment that the crisis is only a financial banking crisis. It has hit the real economy very badly, and you see it, jobs coming down, you see companies closing, and if you're not alter that situation and you create confidence and companies are starting hiring people again and going for new ventures, then you can't solve this problem.
Okay, I would like to focus a little bit more on the kind of policies which might be effective, because tomorrow we heard from Giuliano Bonoli that a lot of labor market policies currently do not seem to be very effective. And therefore, even if we would decide to put more effort in helping people back to work, it's not sure that this will be successful. So don't we run the risk of putting a lot of effort in measures which ultimately turn out not to be effective? Or perhaps I should put it the other way around. What kind of active labor market policies do you think are needed and are possibly effective and will not cost us only a lot of money? Any ideas about this?
I think if
I should be more concrete. I don't know whether you
listen well to Mr. Bonoli. I mean,
okay.
To start with, we know that part of what we have tried didn't work out at all and was very costly. Specifically, the marketization of the reintegration project. There's good research by a number of people from the North, Groningen, that shows that it hasn't worked very well. But Mr. Bonoli has given us quite a good overview of what you might try. We've done some research ourselves. It depends on the group, it depends on the specific problems that you are trying to solve. In the northern part of the country, there is resistant unemployment. Maybe you need structural policies to solve those, and just a labor market policy won't work. In Rotterdam, a lot of low-skilled jobs have been lost in the past 30, 40 years because of the technological innovation in the harbor. So you have a very specific group that you have to work with. The harbor itself is now doing some work on getting kids from the street and offering specific programs to integrate into jobs in the harbor. That's a fantastic project. So I don't think you can say in general this is the way you have to do it. There are a number of approaches, and some work better than others.
And who's to decide what kind of approach is taken?
Well, sometimes it's the local authorities, I think, because they know much better what to do. And sometimes when it's, a problem, for example, of distribution or structural policies, it will be the national or provincial authorities.
Other ideas, or perhaps it's a good idea, because I don't know whether you were present when he was suggesting it. Juliana had the idea of a Keynesian, service Keynesianism, I think it was called. Is it correct? Yeah. Can you please briefly explain it again, and let's see whether they think it's a good idea.
The point I was trying to make earlier is not so much that active labor market policy is not effective. It is effective, but in a limited manner, and it is not enough, in my view, to solve the bigger problem of unemployment, non-employment for low-skilled people. And the idea I suggested was to invest in subsidized employment for low-skilled people, essentially, so that the 50-60% of low-skilled people who have gone through activation measures for a number of years, 1, 2, 3, 4 years. I don't have figures for the Netherlands, but I know, for example, in Germany, Artsphere, this new benefit which was introduced in 2005, there is about 40 to 50% of beneficiaries who are there from the beginning, from 2005, and they've been through all these various activation measures without finding a job. 40 to 50% is not a small minority. It's half of the people, and maybe even more than half, in the sense that many are just stop and goers, and these are not really people we should worry too much about. So the idea is to develop a segment of subsidized jobs that are available to these people, that allow them sort of to escape, to move out of benefit dependency in a way that needs to be worked out. I highlighted this very much, but in a way that could have a net cost of zero or even negative for the public sector, in the sense that these people are costing money anyway.
So create subsidized jobs, focus on, I think, mainly consumer services and things like that, or other services, yeah.
Accessible for those.
Okay, we have, of course, had experience in the Netherlands in the 1990s with subsidized jobs. Is it a good idea to create them again, recreate them again? Who would like to comment on this?
It's probably not for nothing that they aren't there anymore.
So you conclude they were a failure?
So I don't think that is a real option. Otherwise, why aren't they there anymore? But on the other hand, but then you go to another way of discussing. You could say that every type of welfare or money anybody receives from the government has to be compensated with an activity and not sitting at home.
So working for your benefit?
Yeah.
Okay. This is your idea. Is there anyone here in favor of this idea of creating new jobs?
No, but I'm one, well, what you would call a Keynesian proposal can be what I would call partial unemployment. And we have had some good experience together with our previous partner, the Social Democrats, during the previous crisis. But then there should be a very severe crisis, and then such an instrument can be useful. But I'm not in favor.
Not at the moment.
No, I don't think so, but you never know. But I think in such a circumstance you should, think about it. At this moment, I don't believe that we should have milk jobs again.
Anyone in favor?
I'm much more in doubt about it, actually, because I think the picture that we've had this morning, that lower skilled jobs were available during the industrialization phase, specifically in the 40s, 50s and 60s, and they've been lost. And it is very hard to find a good match between lower skilled people and the jobs that are available. You have to do something about it. I mean, it's a completely different problem than we have in Spain or in Ireland. But in Holland, there might be specific situations where this works. I'm not so negative about the milk jobs as many people to the right have been.
But on the other hand, the councillor in Rotterdam, Mr. Florijn, has tried to put people on low.
Yeah.
It didn't work.
Yeah, sure, but because Rotterdam is not going to pay for melkbanen.
No,
it's quite easy.
They were not paying for melkbanen. They were asked to work in the agriculture.
They don't exist anymore, and he is trying to get people back to the labor markets. Of course he is doing that.
That was not what he was doing. He had coaches full of people transported to the Westland area to look, would you want to work in there? The answer was 3 people said yes.
Yeah.
So you think you should be more strict towards the benefit?
Well, that's what I said. There is a balance between the money you get and the activities you should do for it. Okay. Because, on the other hand, we seem to have something like a budget deficit, which is quite out of hand to some extent. And we don't have the money anymore. We have used to live like that on the gas, but the gas is over.
We're gradually moving to the end of the discussion.
We have a lot of wind, so
Yeah, but that's difficult to sell, wind.
I would like to give you the opportunity. Please be quiet.
Sorry.
I would like to give you the opportunity if you would like to add something to the discussion. So if you think some important issues have not been addressed, or if you have perhaps again a solution not for the problems in America but for the problems in the Netherlands, then please give your contribution. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Nico Brock. I work at an organization about youth with disability and work. What I always find very curious is that when it is about people with a disability at work, it is never about the labor market. It is always about the regulations, about the welfare, about the money they cost, but they're never shown in the parties and programs of the political parties as potential employees. They're never addressed as maybe entrepreneurs. They're always only a kind of cost and never a potential benefit to the labor market. And if you never show people with a disability as potential employees and entrepreneurs, they will never work as entrepreneurs and employees. So my question is, why is the politics always about the cost of people and never about the things that they can do?
Okay, thank you very much. Why aren't people with disabilities, with handicaps, not treated more positively as some people who can contribute anything to our economy instead of who cost?
I think you're right. It is addressed often as a problem and not as an opportunity. And of course, when labor markets are tightening more and with the aging population, I'm very hopeful that the potential of everyone will be seen more than what we did in the past when we have an overcrowded labor market and you could say, well, people with this or with that, or in Dutch, I don't know what the English expression is, we always looked for the sheep with the 5 legs, and it was impossible to find. Well, you see already when market's tightening, you have to be sure that you use every capability of everyone. So I'm hopeful that this will change because of that.
But yourself from business, do you see any tendency that companies are more willing to hire people who are not perfect than they used to be in the past?
That depends. In some sectors where the tightness is very, very much there, they are more looking into it and they say, well, we are not looking if you're disabled, but can you do the job? Or can you do the things, I mean, you can be disabled in your legs, but you can still do a lot of things and to contribute in technical or design things in other factors. So you see an increase in that people are more aware of, well, what they call sustainability and people's sustainability, employees' sustainability, and looking broader at what they can get from the labor market, more than in the past.
Okay, thank you. More questions, remarks? Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. I'm Bijay Upasi. My question is, what are your plans about youth unemployment? Because this crisis, this is hurting the young very much, and if in a couple of years, if we do nothing, we have a lost generation. I didn't hear something about one of your political parties about youth unemployment. I didn't hear anything about in the media campaign. So please give me your vision about how to tackle youth unemployment.
Okay, this is then the final moment for you to say something in general. So please give a reply to this question, all of you, but you can take opportunity to, if you want still to say something different, to include that in your answer. Let's start with Frans Becker. What do you offer the young generation in this crisis?
Well, it is, let's say, the differences again are enormous between countries like Spain and the Netherlands. If you're talking about Spain, where you have about 25% of unemployment and about 40% of youth unemployment, what should you do? I think there's a number of things to do. I think you have to get rid of the deflationary policies. You have to restructure the economy. So you have to, what we were talking about this morning, because part of it is a sectoral problem. Part of it is migration. I mean, young Spaniards come work here to earn a living. What can we do here? I think here also it depends on your education that you have had. I think in terms of, for example, vocational education, we can invest a lot more in a dual system of work and education, which could help young people to get training in a job and training at school, and combine these in order to get a better starting position on the labor market. That would be an extremely important way to get kids in vocational training on the track. As far as the higher educated, I mean, you could see in the statistics that in principle they perform a lot better. What I see around me is that a lot of college students and university students who graduate have an enormous problem of getting a job at this moment. What they do is they extend their stagiaire period, etc., the trainee period, and try to find their way. I remember very well that in the early 80s it was exactly the same. Yeah. What they do is they get, in the end, jobs that lesser qualified people should have. That's part of what is happening at the moment. Maybe you should have specific programs. You should. One of the things that I like very much of, for example, the technical universities in Eindhoven and Delft and Twente, is that they provide an enormous amount of incentives for graduates to start their own business and to develop in that way. There would be programs that could perhaps help also young college graduates to get on the track.
Okay, thank you very much.
I would like to say one more general thing.
Okay.
We are talking about very specific policies. That is not my job. I have read a lot about it and we discuss a lot about it, but our think tank is not specified in this or that policy. That will be negotiated on a completely different level. We can do some propositions, but we can analyze the general trends. And I think that what has confirmed my views this morning is that what the general trend is towards more flexibility, towards bad flexibility, and towards what I would call a kind of an hourglass economy, or an hourglass labor market, where people can drop down very easily, but it is very hard to climb unless you turn the hourglass. We have no ability to turn the hourglass in terms of the labor market. And I think that any government should try to respond to that trend in order to improve the world of labor against these trends.
Okay, thank you very much. Arjan Vliegenthart.
Yeah, well, I subscribe to a lot of things that Frans has said. I would perhaps know, it's always interesting to see that the academic institutes of both our parties seem to have similar ideas on where society is going. Perhaps the rest of our party can learn from that. That would benefit especially the Social Democrats, I would think. But having said that, I agree, and I would add as a polemical but also a candid remark is that we need to rethink the hiring the pension age, what we're currently doing. If you look at certain sectors, for instance, in academia, people can work easily until 70 currently. That's no problem, physically speaking, but they block
Mentally
occupation.
speaking, it's different.
Well, sometimes mentally speaking, it's different. But I do know a lot of people that are 65 and still feel young. But I think that is something that we also could rethink for at least for the time being, as long as the crisis is there. But I do think that the topic of the seminar, Never Waste a Good Crisis, was well chosen, because I think that this crisis is an opportunity to rethink some of the fundamental problems within the labor market. But having said that, I think that indeed, as Frans already pointed out, you have to look into the labor market as a part of integral part of an economy that also influences corporate governance structures, but also the educational system and the way in which the government is actually taking its role and its responsibility within society at large. And I do think that what we have seen is the breakdown of a current, let's say, neoclassical liberal system that doesn't seem to be working, that just doesn't seem to be providing us the answers. That's also what we see in Europe. So we do need to fundamentally rethink our economy, and therefore we also need to rethink, as part of that, the way in which we have structured the labor market.
Thank you very much. Raymond Brood.
Well, the dogmatic part of how you see that things should change is, of course, quite on the contrary to the beliefs of me and my party. But I'm with you that creating a lost generation is probably the worst thing you can do. We obviously don't have a VUT type of money anymore to do this, so we have to create this in a different way. And on the other hand, the Earth or the world or the Earth, I don't know what the book is flat. So it is easier than always to be an entrepreneur, to do something else, and to create the world as your marketplace. And in the past, of course, it was limited to provinces in the Netherlands. Now it's to countries in the EU, but it's the world. So my suggestion would be, don't be too much focused on the square kilometers you're living on. There's more to do. And there is far more openness all around the world to accept intelligence from every part. Having said that, what you also see, there is a mismatch of what education is delivered on one hand and what companies need on the other hand. Frans was going back to the system where people were more trained on the working floor, and the mix of the combination of teaching and be actual at work. I think that's a very good idea, and you see already the company schools starting again, so that will help. On the top end, it's more like taking the broad picture, I would say.
Okay, thank you very much. Finally, Raymond Gradus.
Yeah, 2 remarks. First of all, I agree with you that the division of the labor market is one of the great concerns. There is currently youth people which have flexible labor contracts, and I believe that one important element of a new reform should deal with this kind of issue. Also, I agree that there is disability is, of course, something we have to deal with as well. In the 90s, we have had a very great reform with respect to disability. I believe that we have made a large change in that respect. After consulting the social partners at that time, etc., there is still some work to do, especially what you also said about what is the role of employers in that respect, and I hope there will be room as well for a labor market reform.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Arjan Vliegenthart, Frans Becker, Raymond Gradus, and Raymond Brood for this contribution to this debate. Thank you. Okay, on the program there is still a quarter of an hour for me to draw some general conclusions from this debate. And I'm quite sure you would love to sit here for 15 minutes more, but I think it would be better if we all move downstairs and then drink something, and then I think you will be able to draw conclusions yourself. We will let you know by email when the videotape is ready and will be available on our website, and then you will also get the opportunity to tell us, to tell AIAS, what you thought of this conference and what we should improve in the future. I would like to thank you very much for your presence here, for your contribution to the debate, for your patience to hear to all the long presentations and discussions, but I hope that it was worthwhile. Thank you, and see you again next year.